I think it's safe to say that Stanley Johnson's first 2 seasons in the NBA haven't exactly been ideal, and I do think he has a chance to improve into a quality rotation NBA player and perhaps even a starter, but based on the first 2 years, that might take a little longer than I'd like it to. And the thing with Stanley Johnson is, when you look at it from a physical standpoint, you figured he was going to be ready to go from day one, you know? 6'6", 6'7", around there. Pretty strong dude. Had one of the more NBA-ready bodies in the NBA draft. And I would say defensively, he's definitely shown up. But all these clips, you'll notice they're offensive clips, and that's because that's what he's got to work on. He's got to find some sort of offensive ability that will allow him to just give his team productive minutes. Whether it be as a ball handler, someone who could perhaps beat some defenders one-on-one or attack closeouts if the other team's going to give him spacing, or maybe he can grab a rebound, bring it up floor himself, be a good passer, play in the pick and roll, that sort of a thing. Or he can develop as a shooter, someone who can provide spacing for the rest of his guys, and even if he's not going to be some amazing outside shooter, Kyle Korver style, as long as you can just be good enough to where the defense has to care about you being out there, then that's all I think Stanley Johnson needs. Because when we look at the things he does do well, which is mainly defense, being an athlete, and being effective in transition, I think there's a real avenue for Stanley Johnson being a NBA player who plays a decent amount of minutes. So I like Stanley's physical stuff. The overall game is going to have to get there. Maybe it'll happen this upcoming season. I think the Pistons are going to use him a lot. Next, we got to talk about Taurean Prince, who I feel is one of the more underrated NBA rookies of this previous season. He's a rookie, right? He better be, or else this is kind of awkward. But I do think he wasn't really talked about that much. Kind of makes sense because Atlanta was trying to maintain some sort of relevancy in the Eastern Conference. Taurean Prince is similar to Stanley Johnson from a physical standpoint, I would say. Tall dude and all that. And I think he's in a similar boat to Stanley in terms of we're just going to have to see where the offensive game is. But I do want to talk about his defense a little bit, just because I think he's so not talked about at all. I think he's got the potential to be a really, really good defensive player because, I mean, the strength is there, the size is there for him. And when I see Taurean Prince, I kind of picture like the ideal sort of 3-and-D NBA player. For some reason, I kind of compare him to like Iman Shumpert, but maybe a slightly taller version. Like, Shumpert had a couple of seasons where his three-point shot was actually a thing to go along with his defense and his athleticism, and I do think that could be the avenue for Taurean Prince, just being a quality NBA player. And I think because the Atlanta Hawks, I mean, they're going to suck this year. They're going to have a bunch of young dudes. I don't see any reason why Prince doesn't start at the small forward position for them and play a significant amount of minutes. One thing I'm intrigued at with Taurean, seems to have a decent handle. Maybe not someone who's going to run the offense for me, but I've seen him in moments bringing the ball up floor himself or in just straight right-handed drives. He's able to beat guys off the dribble. So I do think he's got some real capabilities offensively that could come out in this season. Here's another video of me talking about Norman Powell and how awesome he is. Now, the thing is, Norman Powell, I would say, is really a natural shooting guard. I would say he's someone who can defend the point guard spot and the 2-guard spot pretty well. But the reason I'm including him in a small forward video is because if he's going to take off this season, it's going to have to be at the small forward position because, of course, DeMar DeRozan is the starting 2-guard of the Raptors, and in all the significant minutes, starting the game, ending the game, things like that, DeRozan's going to be the 2, and if Powell's in there with DeRozan, he's going to have to be the small forward. Now, I've talked a lot about Norman Powell just as a player in the past and why I like him, so I won't take too long. I just, 3-and-D player, decently athletic, seems like he can be a low-usage guy who just makes you a lot better, and I think the Raptors definitely need those type of guys because they tried DeMarre Carroll in that role. They gave him $15 million a season to hopefully be that multi-position defender who could shoot threes and all that, and Carroll just wasn't able to do it. And given that they already have Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, who are just high offense guys, they're going to need someone like Norman Powell to just fill in the blanks, if you will. Now, I think one fear I do have with Norman is where he can be, like, as a three-point shooter, because I think he's shown signs of it, and I have used the term 3-and-D with him, but I don't think he's just some lights-out outside shooter either. I mean, if they want real shooting, they would probably go with CJ Miles to start over him at that small forward position. But I think Powell, the defense is already there, and I think the three-point shot, it's been good enough for him at this point to where I think you can be intrigued about it. So we're just going to have to see if they actually are going to start him at that small forward position. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, I think he should be the sixth man of these guys if he's not starting, playing at least 25 minutes a game. Could he be one of those bench players who plays 30 minutes a night? Potentially. We're just going to have to see with Norman. And the last one I want to talk about, someone I've talked about before as well, Mo Harkless, who could end up being my favorite role player in the NBA for this season, because his offensive game has made the improvements. You know, when I look at a guy like Stanley Johnson and I see the potential he has defensively, I say to myself, well, I want him to develop something on offense. Mo Harkless is similar because his defensive game is pretty legit as well, someone who can defend point guards through some power forwards, I would say. But the difference with Mo Harkless is he has kind of ironed out an avenue for himself as a good offensive player. I don't think he's ever going to be making his own offense, which is totally fine, but his three-point shot was good this previous season. Transition, he's shown himself to be decent enough. And his post-up game has also been really interesting as well. Whenever he's got a mismatch, he'll just take his back to the basket and take advantage of the size mismatch he might have or whatever. He kind of reminds me of Paul Millsap in that aspect. Maybe he'll grab a rebound, take it down floor, force a smaller player to defend him, and then immediately take him to the post. So Harkless, do I think he could ever get to like a 15-point scorer area? Honestly, yes. I do think he's not capped out at 10 points a game. Sure, for these Blazers, Lillard's going to be shooting a lot. CJ is going to be shooting a lot. Yusuf Nurkic is probably going to be the third most used shooter on this team. But for that number 4 spot, averaging maybe 13 to 15 points a game, being a lower usage dude who just does a lot of things right, I think Mo Harkless is just going to improve on what he did this previous season, where he was one of the best role players in the NBA. Now you'll notice I didn't talk about like Justice Winslow for this video. I think Winslow's pretty well known. I didn't really want to use this video to talk about someone that everyone knows, so that's why I would choose someone like a Taurean Prince for this as opposed to someone like a Justice Winslow.